I didn't know you would know that. That's crazy. Where did that come from in your repertoire?
I have no idea.
Do you know what it's in reference to?
Da, 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 da,
No, it's a dating game. That's a 1970s show in the US. Really? Yeah, as far as I know. That's impressive. That like I mean, to surprise me with that is really a gift. My God. Now my brain is going to wonder, where the hell would you have picked that up?
Andy, it's as good as it gets. You've just peaked.
Ugh, you singing the start of the dating game.
Today,
Tomorrow
Andy.
and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to day.
We have Jeremy Lipkowitz. This might be the first time I pronounced the name better than you. No,
Lipkowitz.
No, I nailed it.
I think Lipkowitz is better than your pronunciation, if I'm honest with you this time around.
I don't really care.
We're going to talk to him about basically progressing from sex addiction into a monk-like life for a short period of time, and then coming out of the back end of that and just discussing that journey.
On
a wonderful
chaos. Myself and Andy were always discussing about our shows that we actually rewatched them.
Yeah, Ronnie thinks I'm a bit pathetic because I'll always watch the beginning of our show just because it kind of puts me in a really nice space.
I just watched the whole thing.
Oh, that's nice.
Like, I really think yesterday's show was one of our best shows.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, I mean, for me, as you know, I talked to you about a moment ago, is that it was emotionally sentimental, or I would say more than sentimental, was that we dealt with ALS, and on the show we actually spoke about our mutual friend whose father is now dying of ALS, and we didn't know how fast it was coming, but he's only going to be alive a very short time.
And for him, it happened quite quick, right? 5 months.
And what I thought was just, I cried when he showed it to me. He sent me a picture today of his dad watching our show with the guest who had ALS, and just thinking that he was spending his last hours of his life with us. Even now, I could cry just thinking of it. That was his. He has whatever he can choose to do, and he's spending it watching and being with us in that way, which is incredible.
Yeah, I didn't think about that.
I did.
I sent him a message this morning just saying, hey, listen, we did a show yesterday about ALS.
Yeah.
And I just had to think about you. I hope you're doing good.
Yeah. Well, he's not doing good. He actually called us in the middle of the show, not knowing that was the show we were doing, which is quite incredible as well. And it keeps going back to the same theme that I've been sort of living with through the last years, is that if we really take our death seriously, then we might even take our lives seriously. And I think a lot of times when we kind of don't take our mortality and say, hey, I've got this time around, let's make the best of it, then we lose all these great opportunities just to make peace with all the things we're struggling with and enjoy ourselves.
And make better choices, right?
I would hope so. I mean, if you had to think, hey, I might die tomorrow, then you might be thinking, why would I tell this person to go screw themselves? I might actually just tell them I love them. That would be a nice alternative. I don't like to go to sleep at night thinking that I regret anything. Like, maybe once a year, actually, I'll have an experience. I'll say, I really feel bad about that.
Really?
Yeah.
So you never feel bad about eating something?
No. I mean, when you say bad, I'm talking about with another person. With another person. Let's qualify that. In very good, what do you say? Context creation. I would say and it was good because we're going to talk to Jeremy about this. I read a post from Jeremy the other day, which I thought was really good. As he said, basically, when it comes to addiction or any form of behavior that takes you away from sort of being present, that working out, creating good patterns that keeps you in a mode where the addiction doesn't come back. Right? Which I can certainly identify. Staying disciplined around physical fitness is really a great tool I found to stay kind of clear in my body and then in my head. Yeah. And weirdly, my first mentor in college, my teacher, right? He basically said, and I was 16 at the time, he said, Andy, if you take care of your body, everything else will kind of flow from there. But if you don't take care of your body, then your issues will come and that'll become the focus of your life. And I remember that from, I was 18 years old when he told me that. It was quite amazing. So, Bambos, hold on. So now this is that moment. I'm looking at you. This is the moment.
Andy, you're projecting.
I know I am. That's the whole purpose. But what's going on in you right now? Name it. Don't even.
Absolutely, there's nothing that's going on me right now.
Okay, but like, there's a face that you'll make sometimes on the show. And whenever you make that face, I'm like, oh shit, he's going down that place.
I can see why you would say that, but now you're projecting.
Okay, but what if you just made your resting face a smile now?
No.
What if you just said,
you know what? This is going to be the face for the whole show.
What if you're just going to make your resting face a smile? Like just a concocted smile. It's no problem. I will be okay with that. Totally. It can be a concocted smile.
You have to make me smile though.
No, I'm not your lap dog or something. That's what people say.
Yeah, my dancing monkey.
Yeah. So we're going to invite Jeremy on. We came to Jeremy through our mutual friend who's been on the show twice already. Yasmine. She's got the hearts of many men watching our show, I know. And you basically said, hey, she's my neighbor and she'd be a good guest. And she has been. And she said, when I told her.
That wasn't the reason she's a good guest, Andy.
What did I say? I didn't know what I have to.
You said that I said she's my neighbor. She would be a good guest. Like, I have a lot of neighbors.
Oh, only because she was your neighbor? No, not in your neighborhood.
We've kind of been quite specific with who we bring on, right?
We have been. I think we've been a bit more selective in our old age. Yeah,
I think we're blabbering too much. Shall we just bring the sex addict on?
Yes, we shall. We must. We will.
Hey, sex addict.
Hey. Even though that probably isn't the reality at all, it just makes it easier for people to tune in. If we find like a nice hook, then it's always great, because I'm sure right now sex addiction is probably not like top of on your life's list of things you're struggling with, I'm guessing.
I would say it still plays a role in my day-to-day life. It's not something that kind of like, oh, that was just back then and now I'm this peaceful, enlightened person. I would say it's still, all of the issues that it relates to in terms of dating and dating apps and intimacy and all that stuff. It's still kind of present for me. Yeah.
Wow.
And are you celebrating it?
I am. I've gotten to a much different place around it for sure, where I'm actually, in some ways grateful that I had experiences with sex addiction because it brought me to kind of questioning what is deeper fulfillment and deeper happiness all about. So yeah, celebrating the addiction for sure.
Yeah, I love it. Well, let's go. By the way, on a side note, this is some random act. I guess I met your mother like about 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Just a random group. She was actually having a book club group, and I've never done 15 years I lived in the Netherlands. I basically have had no social contact, like none. And I just said, you know what? I got a book. There's a book club. Let's just join it. And it was really sweet. Your mom was the organizer, and she, and she says like, so how are we going to coordinate it? And I said, guys, this is going to be the last meeting I joined. So I really liked it and appreciated it, but I just, I know I want to go back into my cave again.
Yeah. She mentioned, she sent me a message and she said, how do you know this guy, Andy?
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a small world.
Yeah. So I'd love to go back. So I think at every age, I don't know how old it was for you, but at some age, I remember going back to, it would have been 13 years old, probably when I saw my first porno movie, 13 or 14. Mm-hmm. And I remember in the Catholic religion, it was so taboo. Like it was just, you don't do that. You don't look at that. It was just so, I remember my dad had a VHS, a tape of a few pornos that he had on it that was hidden in his cupboard in a corner. And all three of me and my brothers, we all knew of that porn tape existing, but none of us spoke about it to one another.
Yeah.
So
I
when
think
was it? When was
everyone
the
has
thing
an
you got used?
experience like that.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
would think so.
Tapes.
Yeah, VHS.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the
Yeah.
thing was, is I always had to remember where it was so I could reverse it back to that exact point. Because God forbid he'd figure out it was me. Right? That's how
Right.
your mind
Wow.
you know that they're going to figure it out, but still you have that anxiety.
Yeah.
So when was it for you, Jeremy?
Yeah, for me, the first introduction was, I believe, if I can kind of remember, I think it was actually comic books. That was my first introduction to something pornographic. There were these superheroes that were in, kind of, skimpy outfits. I remember one in particular that I had this huge crush on, and I must have been 7 or 8 years old. And so that got me into just this feeling of, oh, I'm attracted to that person, sexual imagery. And then from then it went on to lingerie catalogs. I remember the Victoria's Secret catalog and the Macy's catalog. So it started off in this very kind of gentle, softcore way. And then it wasn't until high school, I think, or middle school, I started downloading. Back then it was very hard. You had to download a single picture and you didn't know what it was going to be. And from then it just progressed and it kept going, the way it does for everyone, I think.
Yeah. And you, by the way, for your journey, when would you say that you maybe even recognize that it was problematic? Like, at what point do you say there's something not right here?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I always had that anxiety around it, even though I grew up in a very open, kind of progressive family where my mom was fine with sex and movies. She would rather me watch a movie that has a lot of sex than
a lot of
movie that has violence. Yeah, she was like, I don't want there to be violence, but if there's sex, that's fine.
I mean, she's from Berkeley, right? So she's probably, come on. I mean, it's all fair game there.
Yeah. I mean, my mom and I have talked about all sorts of interesting things, psychedelics and, all that kind of stuff that you would associate with Berkeley. But even though I grew up in that very open kind of way, I still had that anxiety around it where I was trying to hide it even at a young age. So that wasn't really a sign for me that it was problematic. It was more just that, oh, I've got to hide this thing. It's shameful. I don't want people to find out. But it wasn't until I was around 19 or 20 that I realized that porn was actually causing problems in my life. And that was kind of the eye-opening moment. So it wasn't until, a decade later, 12 years later, that I started to actually realize, this is problematic.
And what was the things that were happening that made you realize it was problematic? Like what was those?
There was one moment, there was one day that shifted kind of everything for me. It was, I must have been 20 years old, maybe 21, something like that. Maybe even 22. I don't remember how old exactly, but I was in the end of my college career. So I was a senior in high school, not in high school, sorry, college. And I remember walking down the street one day and it was a sunny day. It was beautiful. My life was going great. I was a stellar student, captain of a sports team, all these sorts of things. And I remember seeing these two girls walking in front of me. And they were walking in the same direction. So we were kind of walking like this. And I remember seeing their butts in front of me. And I was filled with so much longing, so much craving, so much desire, so much lust. And it was this state of intense kind of dissatisfaction where my whole being, it felt like a black hole was kind of opening up inside me where I had this feeling like, I just want that. And I realized in that moment that it doesn't matter how successful my life is, how good things are going. If I'm always focused on what I don't have and what I want in that kind of craving, grasping kind of way, then I'm never going to be satisfied. It doesn't matter, what kind of career I have, what kind of girlfriend, anything. I'm always going to be in this state of craving, of longing, of wanting. And that was a really pivotal moment because I realized that the state of lust itself, or the state of craving, is a state of suffering. It's an uncomfortable, unpleasant state. And I realized that if I didn't make a change in my life, that I'm going to end, this is going to be my future. And I was like, I don't want to be this, 70-year-old man who's trying to pick up on college girls at bars. But I realized that was where I was heading.
Yeah, that's the path.
Yeah. So that was the pivotal moment. That's where I realized, like, oh, like this is a problem. I am creating the conditions of a future of suffering for myself. So that was the moment where, like, my eyes, it was strange because that's where I realized it was a problem and I had to figure something out. And it wasn't for another couple of weeks or months that I started to get into the solution. Yeah.
And that's at 20.
It was probably like 22,
But I mean, that's still, let's face it, that's a young age to start. Because I mean, I think most people go through their teens into like their 20, maybe into the 30s. Yeah. And they just don't even think, they're following almost the chemicals in their body. They don't realize I can see and be aware that those are active in me, moving me in directions that maybe don't serve me. Yeah. Yeah.
I think I was very fortunate. A couple of things. One, I've always been a very introspective, kind of reflective person. So that helped, the fact that I was asking these questions. The other thing that added onto that, the kind of the coming together of both of these things, is that simultaneously with this realization that, I was developing like sex addiction and porn addiction, was that I was incredibly successful academically. I think by the time I finished, I had 14 A+ in a really competitive school. So I was studying genetics and I was always setting the curve in my classes and just very academically, at the elite level. And it was beneficial for me because I had so much success in that and it wasn't making me any happier.
Yeah.
So I had this moment, it's like kind of two moments of like, no amount of sex and porn is ever going to satisfy me. And then also like, no amount of academic achievement is actually fulfilling. And I get to a certain level and then I say, okay, what's more? What's next? And it's this kind of never ending, they call it hedonic adaptation, where you get used to what you had before. So I had these experiences of kind of getting what I wanted really early in life and realizing that it still wasn't making me any happier. So I'm very fortunate that I kind of found it out early, because, I know people into their 50s and 60s who never,
I know people in their 70s and 80s, unfortunately. You used a word I've never heard used before, and it's so fascinating for me because it's so clear what it means. Hedonic adaptation. I've described this 100 times over in different ways, but that term, it sounds like it's clinically diagnosable. And what I've called it is basically anytime anyone says, if I just achieve that, I'm going to be happy. And then I'm always laughing like, okay, so can we sign a piece of paper which says you will be happy once that's achieved? Because I know once you achieve it, you're going to say, yeah, but if I only had that next thing that just is the next. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's, it's everywhere now. And that's the thing. Like, I realize it's not about porn. It's not about sex. It's not about anything. It's like the way that our mind is wired. It's wired to kind of lust after things.
Yeah.
And to develop that false sense of, if I just had this, then I would be happy. Yeah. Or the flip side of that is, if I could just get rid of this, then I would be happy. If I could just get rid of that belly fat. If I could just get rid of this person, if I could just ... then I would be happy. And you're always, you're training your mind to only put it off into the future.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do feel a little bit of confusion, because where exactly is the sex addiction? Is it in the getting lost in the porn world and actually having that as a foundation for what sex is? Like, how do you define sex addiction?
Yeah, it's interesting. So when I talk about it myself, I usually talk more in the terms of porn addiction. So my definition of addiction is more expansive than a lot of people would use it. That I think we're addicted to way more things than we realize. We're addicted to, our smartphones. We're addicted to food. We're addicted to distraction. And so I think sex addiction for me was part of it, where I was always lusting after sleeping with a new person. If I could just sleep with that person, then all my worries would go away. And then I would sleep with them, and maybe a few days later, I would get kind of bored and say, well, I need something new. I need something novel. And so I would look for another person to sleep with. So for some people, it's just porn addiction. They're not really having a lot of sex, and they actually get to the point where normal sex doesn't do it for them. And the only way that they can get off is through porn. For me, it was both. It's like getting addicted to porn, but also, being kind of promiscuous and seeking out sex more than was healthy, I would say. Yeah. Does that help answer the? Yeah.
It's interesting because I think on some of the shows when we've had people talk about addiction, they've said any behavior that's not serving us, which I thought was an interesting definition.
Yeah. There's so much debate around what is an addiction and what's not. Because there might be things that aren't serving you. It's for me, it's about the repeated behavior, and also the aspect of having some aspect of being helpless to break free from it, where you want to stop doing it, but you can't. You feel compelled. It's a compulsion, because there might be things that are not beneficial for you, but you can actually stop.
Yeah.
And I think that this is really helpful in talking about addictions, is that a lot of the things we're addicted to have benefits. And this is a part of the conversation that's really missing in a lot of these conversations, is that a lot of people will say, oh, well, that's bad, stop doing it. But it's like a lot of the things we're addicted to have comforted us and helped us get through periods of our life that were difficult, and to kind of understand that there's a reason behind why we do it.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, because whenever I'm coaching anyone on any subject, it's always like, you did that for a reason and that got you here. So if you judge it, then it's just going to take you longer, because you're going to have shame or guilt or remorse about whatever the past was. So let's just say it served you till now.
Right.
There's some aspect of just embracing whatever it was you needed to do or say to get to where you were. Yeah.
So I need to go into my own little story, which was a few months ago, actually. Beginning of summer, when it was really warm. I've been social distancing I've been celibate for over a year. In a way, I used the celibacy to not jump into another relationship after my last one ended, but at the same time, I was also suppressing something. So I was really blind in what I was actually doing. So I kind of isolate myself from the world. I wasn't really going out. If I saw beautiful women, I wouldn't go talk to them. I'd just go the other way. So I was doing the flight thing.
Yeah.
And when 3 months in COVID, when things opened up a bit, and I just saw that I started judging my lust.
Yeah.
Like, oh, fuck. Like, it's out of control. And I was so uncomfortable in it. And do I go talk to them? That will be the fight. Or do I walk away? And that's the flight. And I discovered the sweet spot of what happens if I just stop what I'm doing and I just allow myself to witness myself while just witnessing the woman. And I have to tell you, and Andy used the words unconditional love, but I cried at witnessing this woman and how it was impacting me on the streets. There were all these tears coming, and I was like, oh wow, so this is actually the sweet spot. So when it gets overwhelming for me, I kind of use that as a signal to slow down and take that feminine energy in with a breath and allow it to penetrate me actually fully. And I'm wondering, how do you resonate with any of what I've shared, or how was it for you?
It's beautiful. Thank you for sharing. These things are so hard to talk about for so many people. So I love having these conversations, because the more that I've been talking about this kind of stuff, the more you realize that everybody is dealing with lust and shame and, all these things that we just don't want to talk about. So I want to thank you for sharing, for both of you guys, for having these conversations. I think for me, a big part of the healing journey for myself was something very similar, which is learning how to actually make space for lust and to actually become friends with it.
Mm.
And, because most of my life was like, oh, this is wrong, this is dirty, I can't show this, I can't show that I'm a sexual person, I need to hide it. And so a big part of the Buddhist path is learning how to actually make space for what's happening and say, oh, okay, right now anger is arising, or right now lust is arising. And so learning how to do that in the moment, it takes the power away from it also, because when you're fighting it is when it's in control, but the moment you can open up to it and just say, oh, okay, lust is arising, what does this feel like? Or how am I feeling? Then you have this moment of not being yanked around by it, not being a slave to the lust, but actually witnessing it. So I would say it's very similar. I connect to a lot of what you're saying. Yeah.
I wanted to add something to that, though. You made it sound like I was far more insightful than I was, which I appreciate. Mm-hmm. But one aspect was you were celibate for a fucking year, Bambos. And you're like judging, like, I have sexual feelings. This is wrong. And I'm like,
slow down. I wanted to fuck everything that moved. Like, I wanted to, like, I'm telling you right now, I wanted to go hunting.
Uh-huh.
And the hunting wasn't coming from a space of love, but it was really coming from this space of just wanting to fuck something.
Yeah.
And that's the part that was making me feel uncomfortable, because I really was yearning for a deep connection, and all of a sudden this comes in, like, oh wow, I don't want this. I don't want this. What do I do with this? Help! I'm trapped in this man's body. Help! Andy likes it when I go wild.
Well, so, I think that's such an important thing to talk about for so many people, is like, there's nothing even wrong with that, with just that animal, like, I just want to fuck something. That's just a natural thing arising because we are sexual creatures. This is also, for me, it was very healing, was learning how to be okay with my sexuality.
I love that we say just to fuck something. Anything that moves.
Give me a banana. I'll give you a grapefruit.
Yeah. But it's part of who we are as.
It's a what I've discovered, it's a creative force.
Yeah.
And even in the shows when you heard Andy talking about me doing a straight face, that normally is a sign that I'm suppressing or I'm not talking about something.
Uh-huh.
And the moment I allow that to flow, then there's just fucking flow.
Yeah.
There's connection. So I experienced that also in the hunting concept.
Yeah.
And I love being a hunter.
Yeah. He used to go every single day, come back with the story of like 3 women he chatted up on the street, just randomly walking up to 3 women, or just, I find you gorgeous. Can we have a coffee or whatever? I mean, that was you. You were in your element.
It was a bit out of hand.
Of course it was, but you were in your element.
Yeah,
if you could take the same energy and put it in a direction where it had more of a reinforcing positive, then you'd immediately be successful in whatever that energy was put towards.
Yeah. It's a life force, right?
It's a life force for sure. What were you going to say, Jeremy?
Just that it's a balance. There's a time for that. And I was just talking with my friend earlier today about this exact thing. But, it's like there can be times when that drive is really empowering, to actually go up to someone you're attracted to on the street and just be very direct and say, hey, I think you're really attractive. I want to know if you are seeing someone. Can I get your number? And sometimes that's really empowering and really important for someone to be able to do.
Yeah.
And there are times when we can get lost in that and it gets out of control or just kind of unbalanced, and we need to kind of pull ourselves back in. So yeah, I really connect with that.
I think that's, if anything in my life, there's a few things that crystallize the older I get, is that there is no constant state. There's a state of flux. And if we're not conscious of that state and the movement within ourselves, then we're just a byproduct of our surroundings.
Yeah.
So in some way, everyone always wants an answer to the question, like, tell me how to do it. And then it's like, well, you don't necessarily have a way. You're just aware that there's things going on, and you can either heighten awareness or you can be a byproduct of two two nice butts in front of you, and then the whole day is gone because you've just,
Excuse me, ladies, I'm about to become a byproduct of your butts.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
You ruined my week.
I'm fine.
Well, and that's what's, for me was really, really important to realize, is that in many ways I was a slave to my mind.
Yeah.
I had no control. I was just being pulled around by this uncontrollable, desire that I had strengthened. That's what learning about neuroplasticity and the neuroscience of what's going on in the mind. One of the quotes that really changed everything for me was, there's this saying in neuroscience, it's neurons that fire together wire together.
Yeah.
And it's like, the more you use certain neural pathways, you're strengthening those pathways in the mind on a structural level. And what I realized when I read that is like, my God, for the last 10 years, every night for 2 to 3 hours, I'm strengthening qualities of lust and objectification.
Oh, yeah.
And that was it. That's what really hit me. That's what changed everything for me. It made me realize, like, I am the one who's doing this. I'm the source. It's not the girl with the nice butt. It's like, I'm the one who's creating this monster.
Yeah, you're feeding it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you don't decide what you think. That's the weird thing I think people don't quite get, is they don't know that they don't decide the thoughts that pop in their head. Yeah. They decide what to do with the thoughts once they popped in their head.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I always had I never told you, I don't think, about this, but my mentor who died some time ago, and he was very much into Krishnamurti and stuff. He would always, in our trainings, he'd always say, think a thought before you think it. And then it was just like, you'd see, it'd always be a business context. Everyone would be looking perplexed. Like, you can't think a thought before you think it. You just have a thought. And that was very fascinating. And yet, in doing what you did, what you suggested, that thought is less likely to keep coming because of you're not reinforcing this connection in your brain, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So you're starting to reinforce other things like understanding or paying attention or compassion. Yeah.
So you broke the pattern by going for a month to a monastery.
Well, it was a long journey. So I was very fortunate that kind of after I started to discover this, I was traveling and ended up in India. And that's where I started really diving into meditation and mindfulness and Buddhist philosophy. And that's where I started doing my first silent meditation retreats, Vipassana retreats. And after that, I was kind of hooked, and I was doing somewhere between 1 to 2 silent retreats a year, for the next decade almost. So I didn't end up ordaining as a monk until much later, maybe 10 years later. That was just kind of okay, this is something that I'm interested in. But the real work for me is actually the dedicated practice of understanding that your mind is powerful and you have to take care of it in the same way you take care of the body. But the month-long silent retreat wasn't until I was maybe 30, 31, 32.
Yeah.
How old are you now?
34. So it was just a couple of years ago.
Nice. But it was a month-long silent retreat.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if anyone's listening to this, I can't recommend silent retreats enough. I think they're so powerful for, they're really horrible. They're not fun. They're the most difficult thing you'll do, because you just sit there and you follow your breath and you watch what's happening. And there's no books, there's no reading or writing or Instagram. You can't snack on stuff. You can't work out. You just sit and you walk, and you sit and you walk, and you sit and you walk. And there's nothing else. But you get to see how crazy your mind is.
Yeah.
You get to see how wild and uncontrollable and, it's wild.
Yeah, I think it's also with mindfulness. Like, if you think about it, like, if the mind is just like this jar with a lot of dirt in it, like, every time you do anything, that pick up a phone or watch a movie, I mean, you're just shaking that jar. So you're just, the waters are muddy. So in a silent retreat, basically, it just becomes sediment. And now everything that isn't clear is like, fuck, where is that coming from? Like, that's pretty wild. Another random thought, like, how did that get there?
Yeah.
I always have this, I saw this image of of the mind being like 10 wild horses, and you're in a chariot and you're trying to pull them instead of letting them take you.
Yeah, another similar analogy is like there's 10 wild horses and they're all running in different directions, and you're stuck in the center trying to hold them all. And with meditation, you can actually learn how to get them going in the same direction, in a direction that is helpful for you. So yeah,
I imagine myself riding the horse in the front of the group, saying, "Hey guys, come along." That's the image I had when I saw the 10 horses. Follow me.
And it tends to talk about his mind does a lot of noise. He never really pays attention to it. Like,
yeah. Like sometimes I'll start a question on the show and I don't know what I'm going to ask, but I'll just say the first 3 words, knowing that something will come out.
So you'll say like, "What is," and then wait to see what comes out of that.
And if Mambo says a straight face, then I'm like, "Oh shit, I got to take more control over the show." So I'll think, "Oh, I got to have a little bit more like, how was it that you turned 20 and what happened after that?" Oh, funny. You also did this interesting. I have a friend who you work with Silly, that the Googles, and I saw from the short look I did on you that you also were working with Silly, and that was Google's attempt at creating a program for mindfulness that would then transcend Google, I think, at some point.
Yeah.
And how was your experience with that? Because that's kind of what I've seen. I've worked with a company, eMindful, which does corporate mindfulness, and they're what I've noticed is that there was a big expectation that mindfulness was going to go crazy in corporations, just like wildfire, and it never took off. It was always a big talk, and it made magazine covers, but it never really just was that big bang, like, oh, everyone's doing this now. Yeah, even in schools.
Yeah, I think it has been. It's been a maybe not a huge kind of uptick, but you actually are seeing it in a lot more companies these days, and bigger companies are adopting it in various forms: mindfulness, emotional intelligence, kind of meditation. So I'm a certified teacher with Silly, with Search Inside Yourself, and I love it, in part because my background is in the sciences, and for the longest time, I couldn't get into anything remotely spiritual because I was so allergic to it. I just thought everything that talked about wellness or happiness or meditation, I thought it was all bullshit. And it wasn't until I started learning about the science behind it, where I started to say, oh, okay, this is actually something I can practice without having to join a religion.
Can we slow that down a second? How beautiful that is. So in order, and you obviously are not the only one, right? I mean, if you look through, like, everyone's like, oh, this is such bullshit. This is crazy. Like, anyone talks about mindfulness, carries a yoga mat, I'm not having a discussion with them. But the humor is that in order for you to get confidence with going down that route, you at least needed to have some degree of, oh, but it's proven by science. Isn't it fascinating how that defines so much, not only of yours, but of just about everyone's life? It's like, if you don't resolve a rational for me, then I can't do the emotional thing.
Yeah. Well, I think because there's so much awful bullshit out there, there's so much stuff that really is genuine, stinking bullshit, where people get taken advantage of. And, I was raised in a Christian household. My parents split up when I was 3. And there was this kind of like, you have to believe in this because that's what it says in our holy book, and you can't question things. And that is one of my biggest things that boils me up, like forcing someone to believe in something because it says it in a book somewhere where you can't question it. And so that really defined a lot of my childhood, where I was a staunch atheist for a long time. And it is unfortunate because it closed off a lot of emotional things to me. But to this day, I still feel that, if something doesn't have like a kind of at least some credibility where it can at least kind of make sense, if you don't know why you're doing something and you're just doing it because somebody says so, that's one of the beautiful things about Buddhism, is that it's part of the Buddhist philosophy is the Buddha himself said, don't believe any of this. Don't believe it because I said it. Don't believe it because it's in any of the books. Only if you test it out and it's true for you, then you should take it on as a practice. Like that's part of the philosophy itself, which is so refreshing, you know?
I think I'm really Buddhist. Because this is always what I tell the people, but I've never studied Buddhism. It's just it's just the only thing that made sense to me anymore.
Yeah. I think everyone's a Buddhist in the sense that what Buddhism is really about, when you look at the origins of it and the fundamental aspects, it's about understanding what is leading to suffering in your life. Mm-hmm. You know, what are the causes of suffering and how do you cultivate things, you know, that lead to more well-being?
Yeah.
And it's just about investigating your own experience. And so that's it really is, you know, you can fit it into any lifestyle. It's not about belief.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always like, in any relationship, I'm like, okay, so wherever you have an expectation, which would then maybe in Buddhism be called attachment, to another person, to what you expect their behavior to be, to what your desire, that's codependency. Like I've got a really clear definition in my head. Once I need you to be a certain way so I feel okay, that's codependency. At that moment, you know, sign the divorce papers.
Yeah.
2 minutes ago, Bambos, you smiled. What did you smile about?
I don't remember.
Oh, shit. Okay. I didn't want to
when you said, when you were talking about if you don't know why you're doing something.
Yeah.
And I spent a big part of last year's winter jumping in the canals of Amsterdam at 5 a.m. And I really didn't know why I was there. Like every morning I was scared.
Yeah.
So I was so scared that I had to do it. But doing it every day consistently didn't take away the fear, but it was just something that I had to do. And when people would ask me, I just didn't have a rational something to satisfy you. So sometimes I don't have a roadmap as to why I'll do things, but I'll do them. And I always have trouble articulating.
Yeah, that to me is a totally different thing, though.
I would agree. Yeah,
when you're doing something because you have to do it, I'm talking about don't do something that somebody says you have to do this.
I want to keep a straight face.
Not indoctrination. No indoctrination is what we're talking about.
I love the sound of your voice.
Oh wow!
You have a very your voice lands really beautifully in my body. Yeah.
Could you sing something for us?
No. Maybe towards the end we can ask him to sing. So, what is the relationship you have right now in this time with your penis?
What a great question.
I know. Andy, sit.
You know what? There's no back support on this sofa, and I'd like to take a little break.
Yeah, but then you get the backdrop all messy.
Okay. I'm back. What's your relationship with your penis?
Yeah. You know, I've never thought about that, but to this, you know, there's still some tension there. There's still some like a battle there. You know, I said this at the beginning, I'm not at the place where...
When I asked that question, what happened inside you? How did the words land in you?
I think it was more curiosity, kind of interest. Yeah. Yeah. You know, I think for me, I talked about this earlier on, that like it is probably still the thing that causes me the most suffering. You know, I'm very happy with who I am, but there's still a lot of growth I have to do, particularly around intimacy and relationships. And, you know, I feel that a lot of the stuff I did to my mind early on in my life, you know, it has left deep imprints that I'm still healing slowly.
So what would be the most, if you would just name the thing, what would be the thing that you're still struggling with? That you haven't fully embraced, you haven't fully owned?
Yeah. I think my penis, you know, wants me to do things that aren't necessarily going to lead to my long-term well-being. You know, it has needs of its own. And, you know, my rational brain can say like, that girl's not right for you. But my penis will say, I don't care. Yeah. Let's go for it. Like, I don't care. You know, you still need to go talk to her, or you still need to like, and so that's, I would say the struggle is like the two minds, you know, the mind of, you know, my deeper aspirations of being more loving, more compassionate, more of a brother and a father and a healer, and kind of treating people in that kind of true love way. And then there's the mind of the penis that says, I want that, you know, like, get it. So it's not a huge battle, but I would say that is kind of
it's a huge battle.
It is. Yeah. I mean, it's a like, dynamic that can really take over.
Let's unpack something right now.
Yeah.
So let's say you do see a woman right now in these times, and you.
By the way, can I qualify something before you go down this route? Because you're asking a lot of questions, but you're asking them because of your experience as well. So I'd love it if you qualify a little bit of your questions to Jeremy with your experience.
So I
because I hear his experience, but he's not expressing it.
Great. So I've had consequences where I have listened to the penis.
Yeah.
And so you got the beautiful girl, but it wasn't someone that you would want to wake up with the next day.
Yeah.
So in a way, my rationale sometimes says, wow, she looks great. You talk to her, and sometimes I'll see my mind like, oh, but it would be so good. And like, actually, no, this stereotype of woman, you've had that, and it doesn't surrender. It's actually not very enjoyable. So if you would get her pregnant, you're fucked. So I have that contrast in me so clear. So even if I do talk to a woman, I can feel it's not a full yes. It's not a full yes. And I know where the full yes. I know how a full yes would feel like, because I'll probably carry her home with me in my mind, because she's amazing. She's a wow. So I'm wondering, when your mind says she's not right for you, if that is coming from the experience of actually she isn't right for you.
Well, you never know. I mean, that's part of the intricacy of dating is, you know, you can have this idea, oh, she's not right for me because of X, Y, and Z. And the truth is, you don't know. And you know,
that's an interesting point. That's an interesting point, because I'd like to hold that one back to Bambos. Bambos is quite certain that he knows.
Yeah.
And I'm almost fascinated, because at this moment, like, I have a like, my brain kind of siphoned into two parts. Like, I could see your side and I could see his side at the same time.
Yeah. It's just different context, right?
Of course, it's always different context, but I'd love to at least acknowledge this moment right now, because it's such a beautiful one.
Yeah.
Without diminishing each other's
experience.
experience.
Of course not.
Right. Well, and I'm many times on the same side of, oh, I know this person's not right for me. So I see both as true. One of the things that I'd like to add into this conversation that for me feels very relevant is that I know that my interaction, particularly with pornography and the way that porn is set up in terms of you're scrolling through thousands of videos and you're looking for the one thing that's going to be perfect. And you do that, you know, if you do that every night for 10 years, for me, I had trained my mind to look for perfection and to always be scanning, and my brain was getting addicted to novelty. And so I can recognize that if I'm having this dance of the mind and the penis and thinking like, is this the right person? There's a strong momentum of my mind that is unjustly critical of other people, particularly women and their bodies and, you know, them as potential partners. And so I know that there's a strong pull in the mind that says, well, no, you know, their nose is a little crooked, or their breath smells bad, or, you know, I can't, rather than having this kind of more open, like, hey, we're all imperfect. We're all kind of messy. And true love is about accepting someone as they are. It doesn't mean you should get into a relationship with everyone. You know, there has to be some threshold of like, you know, I talk about this with my mom, you know, all the time. My mom's you should have my mom on the podcast, but we talk about, you know, there's this threshold that it's kind of spiritual bypassing to say like, well, none of it matters. You should just learn how to accept everyone and just love everything all the time.
Yeah.
Like, no, you have needs and you have requirements, and somebody might not be perfect for you, and you shouldn't put up with everyone. So I'm totally torn on this. I really
I'd like to share, like, I used to pick helpless women who I thought that I could take care of. And then I would blame them when they didn't accelerate in whatever I thought they needed to accelerate in to be independent.
Codependency.
Yeah. I did that for like years. I did that several times over.
Yeah.
Like, she's so innocent. I'm going to take her and like be the knight in shining armor.
Yeah.
And then take care of them. And then as they're not, making dumb decisions, maybe we're leading other men on, because they weren't necessarily other men. It was almost like, like a blood in the water and a shark, like the other men feeling the same kind of need to solve a weakness in this person. And so I had that several times over.
Yeah. I want to give you guys a heads up that I have a coaching call in 10 minutes. And so I just want to, in case you have any
I've got a date in 10 minutes. So we're good.
Andy's breaking his fast this evening.
How did you know that?
Well, you said date. It means you're going to go eat.
Bastard.
I think for me, I've invited women in my life that were quite. So you can say you love them, but it doesn't mean that you have to invite them in, right? So in general, I used to attract women who have daddy issues, and if I even smell that, it's a huge no. I've done that so many times. I don't care who you are. I know how that's going to end, and it doesn't end well. So I've pretty much said no to women who don't have peace with their dad.
Hey, how's your relationship with your dad?
Actually, you know what? I'll ask these kind of questions. Or like, hey, so why are you single? Like, you're intelligent, you're beautiful. So, and the way they're going to talk about their ex also tells me, if they're like, oh, he's amazing, but it just didn't work out, then I'm like, okay, so you can still celebrate him. But if she's like, what a complete dick, and I just see that she's incapable of taking responsibility, I value people that take responsibility in their life. And it means I'm going to be with someone that doesn't do that in their life in relation to me.
Yeah.
So,
but we could all agree on that. No, Jeremy, you'd be on board for that. Like, I like someone's behavior is indicative of their behavior going forward. I mean, we all change, but I imagine all three of us would be with the same person, and we wouldn't necessarily be attracted to them not physically. I'm not talking physically. I'm just saying from behavior. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's an important thing from just a healthy relationship perspective, like learning, being in a relationship and knowing how to take responsibility for certain things.
Yeah.
Is so important. Yeah.
You said something that I really was quite curious about. I thought it was really nice. And it goes back to a little bit, even the hedonic adaptation. And you used another word, which I also see quite similar, is novelty.
Yeah.
So it was interesting because it was very much the brain's inability to make peace with it is as it is. It can't just say, so if you're scrolling through and you're saying, I've got to find the perfect video, it's no different than saying, I just made $1 million, but I got to make 10 million now.
Exactly. Yeah. And so one of my favorite aspects of Buddhist philosophy or meditation training is this mental quality or this skill or technique or whatever you want to call it, something called equanimity. And it's a particular mental quality. It's also something you can intentionally cultivate, but it's the quality of learning how to be kind of at peace with the way things are, regardless of how the circumstances are. So circumstances might be unpleasant, they might be pleasant, but learning how to be kind of grounded and centered and, grateful or content or at peace is something that I was completely lacking. And I think it's at the core of mindfulness training is, can you sit in the middle of things? And when something's pleasant, can you just appreciate the pleasantness of it without grasping onto it? And if something is unpleasant, can you kind of let it be there without trying to actively push it away? And that's this quality of really being grounded. So you're not, sometimes the path of enlightenment is called, unconditional freedom, where you're free regardless of the conditions. Whether you get what you want or you have what you don't want, you're at peace either way. And that's the ultimate thing that we're training.
I'm a Buddhist, Bambos. Jesus Christ.
So as you're talking, and it's like getting a confirmation, like, I'm a Buddhist.
I didn't know I was a Buddhist, but I don't know if you've seen the new book.
I haven't, no.
The Wounded Healer that came out at bookstores everywhere.
It's number one in Holland. Let's go all in. It's
I heard you're a best-selling author.
In the US.
Yeah, best-selling author. I can say that now, and it wouldn't be a total lie. But the thing is something that in the chapter, it was I was in Las Vegas, and I'd just done a very intense, emotionally connected sessions for a few weeks at least. And then I go to Las Vegas, and I'm on this horrible strip, Fremont Street, which is just, it's the dregs of humanity all hanging out together. And I felt totally disconnected. And I laughed because I realized, and I wrote the last paragraph of this section was that I'm not looking to find places that I'm happy. I'm looking to be happy whatever place I find myself in. Mm-hmm. And it was just, as you spoke, I could hear those words coming back in my head. It's really, the journey is, if you need to be somewhere, if you need to be Buddha on the mountain to be happy, then you're not really happy. You're just found an environment to escape to. So
right. Yeah.
That's another word, equanimity. I'll be holding on to that word as well, and forget it tomorrow.
He's going to be, no, I'll remind you.
Okay.
So we have about 3.5 minutes.
Yeah.
I know you need to go. Is there anything that you'd like to address before we...
Any parting words? Anything you'd like to sell?
Yeah, nothing to sell. I mean, if you're interested in coaching, you can get in touch. Particularly if you struggle with any of these things.
I'd hire you because, like I said, I like the sound of your voice.
Yeah.
And the reason I like the sound of your voice is because it's coming from your belly, from your core. You're very congruent. And in moments where I kind of challenged you to see if you would, like, how would you react? You owned it beautifully. Like,
oh, so I was keying in on the right thing when I said, stop being such a dick.
Yeah.
Nice. I could feel that energy. I was like, where the fuck is that coming from? Okay, good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. But
so thank you, first of all. That's very kind. I would say the one thing I'd love to leave people with is that, just if you're struggling with this, because I know so many people struggle with porn addiction and sex addiction or dating addiction, whatever way it plays out in their life. So many people struggle with it, with this sense of shame. And I think understanding that you're not a bad person for being a sexual person.
Yeah.
And that the sooner you can learn how to open up to somebody about it and say, hey, I'm really struggling with this. I'm struggling with loneliness, with lust, whatever it is, healing, you need to learn how to open up to it, to yourself and to other people before the healing can really begin.
Yeah.
And so just knowing that you're not alone, everyone out there kind of struggles with these things. That's what I'd really like to leave people with.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Yeah. I think the shame occurs when you feel like you're the only one.
Yeah.
And you go into that.
No one understands me.
No one understands.
It's just me.
Yeah. If you haven't seen, we have this group online, the And It's Fucking Great. It's And It's Fucking Great group. And basically it's just everywhere. Everyone can declare the things that they can't make peace within themselves with the hashtag And It's Fucking Great.
Yeah.
So I liked your one today.
I didn't like my one today. It wasn't. You know what I liked about it though? We have a friend whose father's dying, and I've been kind of connecting to him. So I'm feeling a little bit of the tangential pain of that loss. And he's going to die in the coming days, and it's fucking great. And I realized I couldn't say that. And so I said, and I can't make peace with that. And it's fucking great. And the beauty was
that's the part I liked.
That was the part that it was like making peace with what I can make peace with, and embracing it for what it really is, and not trying to spiritually bypass it.
Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah. I unfortunately have to hop off really quick.
Thank you very much. It was great being with you.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
If you ever want to chat about it again.
Yeah, maybe we'll find another theme to bring you on about.
Let's do that, Jeremy. Have a beautiful evening.
Bye, Jeremy.
Bye.
Thanks.
Okay. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Isn't it funny that we also do get a lot of people who had a history with the church?
Isn't it crazy that we become a church program? We become, our editor for our podcast. So the person who edits our podcast is Cass Midgley. Cass Midgley had the show Everyone's Agnostic, which was a really big show. It still gets a lot of downloads. And he spent years railing against the church. Like that was his gig.
He compared it to something. What was it?
I don't know. It was horrid.
It was horrid.
But it's interesting is that we keep pulling on more and more people that have massive problems with it. I mean, Jeremy wasn't a massive, but people are having massive issues. I mean, it's a common thread.
Actually, I kind of recognized after hearing also David yesterday that I was raised in a very strict Orthodox.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, really strict. Like we get beaten if we didn't go to church.
Wow.
Or if we would give trouble going to church. Like church was a every Sunday thing.
Really?
And I had to go to Sunday school. It was really forced.
I didn't know that.
I actually only I have a lot of memories that are blocked.
Yeah.
And I just had this image in Sunday. So I'm like, wow, incredible. And these priests never made sense to me. Or at least the 3 priests that I encountered, they just didn't make sense.
Well, I was hugged by the priest, so I have a different take on it. For an extended period of time with the FBI visiting the house to ask me about it, right?
I love it.
Yeah. I understand, and I see somehow I outgrew it quickly, so I really didn't have a big problem with it. But I saw that a lot of people it was part of their culture, part of their, my mom was very religious. In fact, did you know my mom was going to become a nun?
Jesus.
Yeah, my mom got the marriage annulled to my dad so that she could become a nun. She was going to join the monastery.
Wow.
And she died before. But the thing was that although she was very, very religious, she didn't impose it on me, which I thought was really beautiful. She said at some point, you get to decide what you want, but till this point, you got to go to church. And what I used to do when I went to church is I went to my friend's house and watched WWF, World Wrestling Federation for an hour. And then I went home. That's what I did. So next week, we've got a nice lineup of shows as well, right?
What is the truth?
Craig Weinberg, I believe he posted Krishnamurti, who I love, and we're going to discuss truth. One of our favorite, at least, listeners who's there every day, but we didn't post today is Bolalang.
Bolalang didn't,
He didn't say a word today, and there was church that came up, so he's not listening because he'd always post. So Bolalang, we're on to you. We know when you're not here. It's like Santa Claus. We know when you've been naughty. Yeah. We're going to do that, and I'm sure Bolalang will be having a lot of questions when we do that.
And on Tuesday, we have the Dark Arts with Shane
Izikowski.
Izikowski.
Shane Izikowski is an incredible artist. He paints. I would call it grotesque. He wouldn't call it grotesque. I liked his art so much that I called up a friend and I said, "You've got to buy this piece," which he bought, and it's now in his home. It's that guy.
Brilliant.
Yes.
Brilliant.
So he has this art that's insanely. It is intense. You can't look at his art without having a visceral feeling. So we're gonna.
Well, you're gonna have a feeling anyway.
What are you talking about?
Or it will impact you.
Yeah.
You can't avoid it.
No. Some Great Minds with Bob Deutsch. Bob has written a lot of books. He's done some TED Talks. He's interviewed some incredible people, including Bruce Springsteen, the boss. He's done research with David Bowie. He's talked to a lot of big names. He's written a lot of books about leadership. And we're going to talk to him about leadership and how it is to discuss this with some great minds. And we also have an artist who I actually was curious to have this artist on, and for a few reasons. He's in Hong Kong, and he's got an interesting take on how the news works. And I really wanted to discuss someone who is in China and how they see the world differently from the West. And it is very different than how we see the world. And if you listen to him speak, it makes as much sense as anything the West says. So I really like listening to someone who gives a totally...
I don't think the West makes any sense, Andy.
Agreed. But let's just put it this way. His take on how things work makes a lot of sense, and it's never seen in the news. And he's in Hong Kong, and he's actually supportive of the Chinese regime, which, you know, anyone in the world would have 100 reasons why they wouldn't be. But when I say supportive, he sees what's going on, and it makes sense to him. And so that's all next week on A Wonderful Chaos. And is there anything you'd like to say?
Have a good weekend, if you can tell the difference.
How do you tell the difference between?
Well, it's not like people can go out.
Oh, you're telling me if you know that it's a weekend. You might not even know this is a weekend. Thank you for being with us this week. See you
Bye,
next.
guys.
Bye.